Brussels Bytes, a podcast about technology, digital society, and European policy. Brought to you by the Martin Centre with Dimitar Lilkov.
Hi friends, I've always wanted to do an episode of Brussels Bytes on quantum computing, so today is the day. How advanced is the global ecosystem on quantum, and where is the EU headed in terms of its own strategy? Does advanced quantum mean no more privacy? There's a lot to unpack here, as this is one of those technical topics which many get excited about, but very few actually understand in detail. Helping us navigate through the labyrinth of quantum computing today is our guest, Milja Kalliosaari. In her previous professional life, Milja has been part of different government agencies and NGOs. It's a pleasure to have you, Milja. Hi.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
Yeah, and as I mentioned, there's a lot to unpack here, but maybe as we start, can you give us a very short intro? What is quantum computing? A little intro maybe for dummies, so you can set the scene and help us navigate this complex topic.
Sure. So to put it in very simple terms, quantum computing represents a leap in traditional computing by using principles of quantum mechanics. So while classical computers use bits as the basic unit for information, represented either as zeros or ones, quantum computers use quantum bits, aka qubits. And these qubits can exist simultaneously in multiple stages, so both zeros and ones, thanks to a property called superposition. And this ability allows quantum computers to process vast number of possibilities at the same time. Another key difference is the entanglement, a quantum phenomenon where qubits become connected and they can be at the stage of one, whether it's 0 or 1, depending on the stage of another, even over long distances. And this is actually what Einstein called as a spooky action from a distance. And this leads to exponentially faster processing times for specific types of problems compared to classical computers. And then lastly, superposition and entanglement are maintained in quantum particles until they are observed or measured. So when the quantum stage is measured, it provides information but causes the system to collapse, resulting in the loss of entanglement and superposition. And this is the so-called cat in a box thought experiment, where hypothetical cat may be observed simultaneously, both alive or dead, while it's unabsorbed in a box.
So you made a connection between Schrodinger's cat and quantum. I love that. But when it comes to actual implications of this complex technology, what can we actually do with it?
Well, in terms of applications, quantum computing holds potential to disrupt various fields. And it can potentially solve problems that are currently beyond the reach of classical computers due to the computational demands. And if we assume that we will witness an existence of universal, large-scale, error-tolerant quantum computer, I think the greatest market impact will be in biomedical or pharmaceutical sectors, as well as maybe in chemistry. So, for example, in developing new medicine, developing or enhancing carbon capture, or in producing more efficient renewable energy sources, for example.
So basically breaking down technological frontiers. Okay. And
exactly.
When you see the current situation in terms of technical advancement, do we have any limits to the technology we have? What are the actual frontiers or maybe bottlenecks this technology right now meets? And what's in store for the future from a very technical viewpoint, basic technical viewpoint?
Well, I think the critical question is achieving the right balance of number of qubits. This is something that the media likes to publish a lot about. But then there is also the accuracy and speed. So this means getting enough qubits to achieve computation power needed for complex problems, then high level of fidelity to get the calculations actually right, and then enough speed to offer the beneficial advantage for the end users. And if we are looking at the scaling up of the number of qubits in quantum computing, it's always a challenge, but it varies depending on the technology used, because there are different types of quantum computers and different types of quantum technologies. So for instance, in superconducting, the silicon wafer itself can host multiple qubits on a single wafer, but the ability for all of those to operate at the same time is limited. And I think a critical question is the system integration, particularly how efficient we manage the wiring with the cooling system. So, for example, traditional copper wires could be replaced by flexible cables, which is an easier way to handle and be more cost efficient. Then the other thing is the physical space required for these wires. So in longer term, eventually we also need a larger cryostat, so a very industrial fridge, because each qubit typically requires around 2 to 5 wires. So let's say we have a 1,000 qubit system, then a number of wires is just going to be huge. And of course, with each wire, the wire generates heat. So the heat increases with the number of wires, and this requires more energy, more enhanced cooling capacity. And so as the count of qubits grows, the cryostat must also evolve to accommodate these needs. And then when it comes to the fidelity, we must maintain the high fidelity with the number of qubits that are increased. I think the target fidelity is around 99.99, which translates to probability of an error of just 1 out of 10,000. And achieving this level of accuracy is important as the error correction becomes significantly more challenging at lower fidelities. And once this fidelity is attained, the focus shifts to replacing and scaling qubits production while ensuring the consistency of quality. And then with speed, I think it's the least important factor. But initially, when we get all of the other things right, it's something that needs to be addressed. And the speed becomes critical factor in distinguishing between different quantum technologies, because this will likely provide competitive edge in practical applications.
So I see that basically the industry is met with the typical problems of many modern technologies, physical limitations, cooling, and all of them are related. Okay.
And mastering them all at the same time.
Yeah, of course. And going from the technical level to maybe the policy level, can you give us a couple of hints? What's happening in the global ecosystem when we talk about quantum? What has been the latest developments, and why should we be excited about this whole sector?
Well, I think everyone is now racing in quantum, and Europe is still one of the leaders. I really believe that this is something that we can truly be a winner and stay technologically self-sufficient also in the future. And I think EU has got this position through significant initiatives that have aimed to establish a robust quantum ecosystem, particularly through structured and well-funded programs. So if we look at the history, what EU has done so far, we had the Quantum Flagship Program that gave us the needed kickstart for the industry. So it was launched in 2018, and many of the quantum startups that we have now were started through that initiative. Then after that, EU has supported commercial ventures, for example, through your HPC program, in which they really focused on aiding the practical development and scaling of the technology by hosting 6 of these quantum computers on the Euro HPC program. Then, of course, there has been legislative support through European Chips Act. So it was a major push to foster investments in quantum chips as well as classical microchips and connect public and private sector. And this is essential if we want to scale up the technology. And then lastly, I think if you look at the global landscape, one thing that's often forgotten, but which is important and where Europe can really compete, is the level of research and science. The McKinsey's recent report on quantum sector from April 2024 highlighted that EU still has the highest number of quantum technology talent. It's one of the leaders in research programs and master's degrees, and EU institutions contribute the most to quantum relevant publications. So this is something that we are still very much a leader of.
Okay. I'm happy to hear that it's not every day that on this podcast and in Brussels that we hear that Europe is in the lead on certain technology, and I'm really happy to hear that. And Milja, when it comes to other global actors, when it comes to maybe even competitors, what's out there in terms of quantum computing, other continents? What are the trends?
So, of course, both US and China are investing in quantum in large amounts. And in the upcoming decades, the global politics will be increasingly influenced by this technological competition, primarily between these two major groups, so China and US-led coalition. And I think this competition is evident already in sectors like military artificial intelligence. But I think quantum technologies will follow the same route, most likely, as it's considered as the next frontier of strategic and military capabilities. And for me, it's been interesting to follow how Finland, as a new member of NATO, as well as part of the EU, is navigating these sectors or these frontiers, really, because, Finland has been one of the European leaders in specifically superconducting quantum computing. So it's an interesting landscape.
Interesting to say the least. You mentioned a couple of developments in the last couple of years on the EU level, and thinking about the next mandate of the European institutions here at the Martin Center. With our recent work, we really try to push forward policy recommendations or ideas for the next mandate. So my question to you is, how can we actually make sure that this technology is properly scaled across the EU? You mentioned a couple of interesting developments, but looking at next, let's say, 3 to 5 years, do we have the necessary comparative advantages? You mentioned human skills, for example, or technology, but in the next couple of years, do we have those advantages to truly scale quantum in the EU?
Yeah, as I said, the quantum flagship of 2018 really established the current ecosystem. But the critical bottleneck that we are facing now is that many of these companies are now in a phase in which they need to scale up. And for that, the investment needs are becoming a major critical challenge. So I think, quantum technology startup really benefit from the early support of this initiative. And we are not in a quantum winter, even though the landscape itself is rather gloomy. But what needs to be really addressed is the lack of private investment as well as the wider industry interest. I think quantum computing, like artificial intelligence, is positioned to be a key driver in future digital transformation. And so far, the critical problem for the wider industry is adapting these technologies, as the maturity level is still rather low, and there is maybe a lack of sufficient understanding of the science for the companies to actually focus their R&D efforts to quantum. This is something that could be addressed maybe through help of wider industry collaboration. So, for example, the role of public support will be a key in maintaining the European quantum ecosystem, especially during the downturn of private investment. And what could be done is maybe support the development of applications through projects focused on piloting practical applications in collaboration with private sector. And this could be done by creating business consortiums along the lines of, for example, venture clienting, which supports investments by industrial companies and long-term customer discovery processes. And this will not only strengthen the commercial exploration of the technology, but also ensure that the wider European quantum system remains competitive on a global level. Then again, there was the critical question of maintaining and using the talent that we have. And I think one thing that could be done on European level is targeted Erasmus programs, for example, for these critical sectors. These strategic partnerships in research and talent exchange, such as, for example, with Erasmus programs with Japan and South Korea, who are very much leading tech champions in the industry, are very much essential to maintain the competitiveness. And it's also a way to attract talent early on and making sure that the companies that we have the workforce needed to compete on global market, especially because it's rather hard to just compete with pure salaries in very dynamic and high demand field. Then, of course, with the talent, we could also help these infrastructure investments that we have. So using the talent, the academic know-how to assist on how we could develop the practical applications. I think, for example, with the Euro HPC program, they are now investing in AI applications, but the issue is that many don't know how to actually use the technological architecture in a way that's sufficient. So through the academic assistance, this could be maybe addressed.
Okay. You mentioned just now a quantum winter. I just want to follow up on that. Was there a suspicion or a worry that there's not going to be sufficient investment in the sector? What brought forward such suspicions or anxiety?
Well, I think Europe in general has been lacking behind on private investment compared to, for example, United States. And now that we are recognized as a critical technology, many are expecting more regulation on the investment side, especially from investments that are coming from outside of EU. So, of course, this is an area in which we need to have new solutions if we are going to regulate the investments more. And I think it's a good initiative. But at the same time, if we are looking at the economic security strategy that the EU has pushed forward, there is the protect, but there is also promote and partnerships. And these two pieces really need to be addressed.
Yeah, maybe for context for our listeners, in January 24, the Commission unveiled its proposals for improved economic security. And one of those proposals was for stricter foreign direct investment screening when it comes to third countries and other players who want to, let's say, maybe bring forward economic coercion or manipulate certain actors in the EU. But I think in this sector and in the future, the EU is going to find the best balance between protecting the investment and also, as the strategy says, promoting and making sure that Europe remains open to FDIs. Okay, so again, lots of optimism here, and then I'm glad to hear that when it comes to the potential of this technology and also the human resources behind it, the EU is not in such a bad position. Now, I just wonder, you mentioned the Erasmus programs. You also mentioned that already the EU raised this topic in 2018. So you see a sufficient realization and political backing from the institutions. Is something else lacking when it comes to the EU level on quantum? What if you have a wish list when it comes to this technology and promoting it better? Do you see any important gaps when you need to address?
Well, I think the investments in R&D and infrastructure are something that the EU really can help with.
Yeah.
So quantum technologies require significant initial investments, particularly in the R&D areas. And European governments can provide this patient capital, which is necessary for long-term backing. As an example, the European Chips Act and similar type of initiatives have been pivotal in creating a conducive environment for technological innovation. And similar type of measures should be targeted for quantum sector. And for quantum technology procurement and investment, I think it would be important to consider how we could actually prioritize solutions produced within the European Union, because this would, in a long term, support the broader objective of strategic autonomy and development of sovereign technological capabilities.
And how about the notorious U.S. Inflation Reduction Act? Should we be concerned about this? Because here in Brussels, there is a sensation that the Americans are trying to steal our lunch and try to attract all the best talent with tax breaks or subsidies. What about the IRA or IRA when it comes to quantum? Do you have any observations there?
Well, in my opinion, I don't have a clear answer for this one, but in general, I think we need global coordination. Of course, as an EU, we cannot tell the US what to do.
Of course.
But I think it would be important to establish a cooperative mechanism and discussion forums with like-minded countries and alliances like NATO, because especially in the technological development phase and, in the creation of standards and policies, it's important to cooperate between different actors that are leading and like-minded, especially as the global tensions in political landscape increase.
Absolutely. I fully support you on this. And together with the Martin Center, these are one of the main recommendations we've been pushing forward when it comes to transatlantic, by the way, because we have a lot of common interests in key technologies on AI, 6G, 5G, and quantum. And we have a joint interest to push forward and promote common standards, as you just mentioned, on the international level. And perhaps, Milja, maybe the EU-US Trade and Technology Council, TTC, in the future can work more on this.
And there is also, on NATO level, they announced the quantum technology strategy, and part of that strategy will be a global quantum community, which is going to be like a platform to discuss topics of the technology and how to develop the technology. And I think it's important that the strong actors in the field are active on that platform and make sure that the ethics, the standards and policies are aligned.
Yep, NATO has a huge role to play here. So we should be happy that Finland just joined NATO so that we can tap into this expertise and this potential. In the closing of our talk, Milja, I'm just wondering about the potential risks here or negative unintended consequences when it comes to quantum technology. So let's say we enter this world of advanced and almost instantaneous quantum computation. Sky's the limit. Does this mean the end of privacy? What will happen to encryption protection when we have quantum technologies?
Yes. So, well, one of the well-known future use cases for quantum computing is indeed the break of encryption. And the threat is highest against asymmetric cryptography, such as RSA, which is used, for example, in key exchange and digital signatures. And although this won't be among the first practical use cases, it will take probably, let's say, 15 to 20 years before quantum computers can be used for this decryption. The threat is already real, since today confidential communications could be stored and then decrypted when the quantum computers are more mature. And from the point of view of the privacy, I think the good thing is that quantum computers cannot be used efficiently against all cryptographic algorithms. And new algorithms are designed to be secure against quantum computers. They are already being developed, tested, and standardized to keep the confidential communication secure also in the future. And these new algorithms are called post-quantum cryptography, or PQC. But keeping all of this in mind, I think all organizations are recommended to become quantum aware and understand when they need to start to migrate to quantum safe algorithms.
Post-quantum, I like that.
Yeah, it's very deterministic in a way.
It's very deterministic. I by the way, recently had a chat with a person who specializes in encryption and protection, and he basically told me, right now, I mean, we have the technology to make sure that your phone is, perfectly secure and all that. But if we implement all of this, basically the energy requirements and the constant computation needed, your everyday phone is just gonna melt in your hand because of the amount of compute you need to make sure that this information stays safe. But yeah, Milja, thank you so much for this conversation.
Thank you for having me.
Dear friends, this was the voice of Milja Kalliosaari, with whom we had this conversation on the future of quantum. And make sure to stay tuned to Brussels Bytes. Next couple of months, we continue with our initiative on policy recommendations on digital for the future European Commission, and trying to tinker and discuss the technologies of the future.
That was today's episode of Brussels Bytes. Follow us on SoundCloud for more.